let's take a moment to turn and greet one another.
Good morning. We gathered together this morning in our individual and collective journeys toward spiritual growth, social transformation, and environmental responsibility, and living out these values through worship, reflection, connection, and service. Some of us come with joy in our hearts. Others come with a deep well of sadness. Others with anxiety about the present or future. Many of us come with a mixture of all of those emotions. Still, we come together. After worship, all are invited to go downstairs to Metcalf Hall for coffee and conversation. While enjoying coffee hour, we also invite you to participate in a service project, assembling care kits for people experiencing homelessness at Mass and Cass in Boston. Reverend Heather will orient the participants. There is also a table with information about the UU Urban Ministry and another table where you can connect with Deb Walsh of our Social Action and Outreach Committee about next week's Soup Jar Project through Volunteer Ventures of Massachusetts. And last and very importantly, you can order Girl Scout cookies from the Wuss Girl Scout Cookie Cooperative. Yay. We now have a couple of special announcements, after which Reverend Heather will introduce our guest preacher.
Good morning, all. My name is Deb Eiler, and I serve on the Winchester Unitarian Society's Nominating and Leadership Development Committee. Frankly, it's a wee bit weird, me standing here encouraging you to consider joining one of the committees that support and sustain the work of this church community, being a reluctant joiner myself. But comfort zone be damned, I took the leap, and first with RE, back when parents actually volunteered to be classroom teachers, then on to a variety, including membership and now nominating. For me, serving on a committee gives me a sense of belonging, a chance to get to know folks a bit better and understand the inner workings of the church a little bit better. That's kind of cool. Plus being useful and being needed, working toward a common goal. I always feel I get much more than I give. So, without further ado, we have a little treat for all. One moment. So, sorry. It's not going any further. All right. Yeah. Whoops. Pretend this is a bow tie and it's all tucked in there. And we have an ice cream scoop and a hat. So, if you're game, we are inviting you all to check out what each church committee is all about at our second annual Sunday Committee Fair in Metcalf Hall on Sunday, February 4th, after the service. Stop by a committee table, check them out, earn a delectable topping for your free Sunday. No limit. You know you want it.
Good morning. Speaking of committees, the music committee and I would like to invite you to our concert this Friday, our annual Jazz in the Sanctuary concert. If you have noticed in your order of service, there's a special little bonus flyer for you. And I invite you to give this to your friends, encourage them to come. As you know, this is a fundraiser for the entire church, so the more people we can get to hear this wonderful concert of the legendary composer and pianist Thelonious Monk. We've got some amazing musicians here on Friday night for your pleasure. So please come, please tell your friends, and let's pack this house. Thank you.
It is my joy to introduce today's worship leader, the Reverend Mary Margaret Earl. She has served as the executive director and senior minister at the Unitarian Universalist Urban Ministry for 9 years, an organization with which WUS has enjoyed a long-time partnership. In her ministry, Reverend Earl strengthens connections between Unitarian Universalists and the Roxbury neighborhood where the urban ministry operates. She has served on the leadership team of Moral Movement Massachusetts, the Roxbury Cultural Network, and currently serves on the search committee for the new Roxbury Community College president. Prior to her arrival at the UU Urban Ministry, she spent 10 years at the faith-based nonprofit in Rhode Island serving the homeless community. Today's message is an excellent way to lift up this month's theme of justice and equity. Let's give a warm welcome to Mary Margaret. I now invite us to open our hearts and minds to the spirit of worship with her words.
In the midst of winter, in the center of the season of deep cold, of unexpected snow, of changeable skies, we call on that which summons our perseverance. In the season of long nights of huddled birds and hibernating bear, in the season that tries us, we call on that which kindles hope and the fire within. The way is long. In this season of bone chill, of glistening waters, when the ice forms slowly, we call on that which keeps calling, keeps whistling through leafless tree branches that tells us the way is long, let us keep moving. The way is long, let us take another step. And now is the time for our chalice lighting.
Invite Ken Mitchell to come forward to light our chalice. Oh, hopefully we have Ken with us. Oh, there you are.
All right. We light our chalice this morning, honoring the fire that burns even on the coldest days, warming our fingertips and our heart, and that keeps hope alive.
Now rise in body, rise in spirit to join in singing hymn number 168 in the gray hymnal, One More Step.
I invite those who are young and young at heart to come forward for a story. Good morning, everybody. Come on up. Good morning. So great to see all these lovely faces this morning. I have a story to read to you today. This is one of my favorite stories, and you're going to want to sit down in front, Olson, so you can see the pictures. All right, so this is a story called Owl Moon, and it has a lot to do with winter, kind of like what Reverend Mary Margaret was talking about earlier, and it also has a lot to do with taking steps. And really, ultimately, it has something to do with hope as well. So this is Owl Moon by Jane Yolen. It was late one winter night, long past my bedtime, when Pa and I went owling. There was no wind, the trees stood still as giant statues, and the moon was so bright the sky seemed to shine. Somewhere behind us, a train whistle blew, long and low, like a sad, sad song. I could hear it through the woolen cap Pa had pulled down over my ears. A farm dog answered the train, and then a second dog joined in. They sang out trains and dogs for a real long time. And when their voices faded away, it was quiet as a dream. We walked on toward the woods, Pa and I. Our feet crunched over the crisp snow, and little gray footprints followed us. Pa made a long shadow, but mine was short and round. I had to run after him every now and then to keep up, and my short, round shadow bumped after me. But I never called out. If you go owling, you have to be quiet. That's what Pa always says. I had been waiting to go owling with Pa for a long, long time. We reached the line of pine trees, black and pointy against the sky, and Pa held up his hand. I stopped right where I was and waited. He looked up, as if searching the stars, as if reading a map up there. The moon made his face into a silver mask. Then he called, "Hoo, hoo, 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 hoo," the sound of a great horned owl. Hoo, 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 hoo. Again he called out, and then again. After each call, he was silent, and for a moment we both listened. But there was no answer. Pa shrugged, and I shrugged. I was not disappointed. My brothers all said, sometimes there's an owl, and sometimes there isn't. We walked on. I could feel the cold as if someone's icy hand was palmed down on my back. Ooh. And my nose and the tops of my cheeks felt cold and hot at the same time, but I never said a word. If you go owling, you have to be quiet and make your own heat. We went into the woods. The shadows were the blackest things I had ever seen. They stained the white snow. My mouth felt furry, for the scarf over it was wet and warm. I didn't ask what kinds of things hid behind black trees in the middle of the night. When you go owling, you have to be brave. Then we came to a clearing in the dark woods. The moon was high above us. It seemed to fit exactly over the center of the clearing, and the snow below it was whiter than the milk in a cereal bowl. I sighed, and Pa held up his hand at the sound. I put my mittens over the scarf, over my mouth, and listened hard. And then Pa called, "Hoo, hoo, 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 hoo. Hoo, 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 hoo." I listened and looked so hard my ears hurt and my eyes got cloudy with the cold. Pa raised his face to call out again, but before he could open his mouth, an echo came threading its way through the trees. Hoo, 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 hoo. Pa almost smiled. Then he called back, "Hoo, hoo, 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 just as if he and the owl were talking about supper or about the woods or the moon or the cold. I took my mitten off the scarf, off my mouth, and I almost smiled too. The owl's call came closer from high up in the trees on the edge of the meadow. Nothing in the meadow moved. All of a sudden, an owl shadow, part of the big tree shadow, lifted off and flew right over us. We watched silently with heat in our mouths, the heat of all those words we had not spoken. The shadow hooted again. Pa turned on his big flashlight and caught the owl just as it was landing on a branch. That owl looks big, doesn't it? Maybe. For 1 minute, 3 minutes, maybe even 100 minutes, we stared at one another. Then the owl pumped its great wings and lifted off the branch like a shadow without sound. It flew back into the forest. "Time to go home," Pa said to me. I knew then I could talk. I could even laugh out loud, but I was a shadow as we walked home. When you go owling, you don't need words or warm or anything but hope. That's what Pa says, the kind of hope that flies on silent wings under a shining owl moon. Now I invite you to sing the children and teachers to church school. The words are in your order of service.
We now come to the centering time in our service, settling in body and spirit, first through words, and then through ritual, kindling of the light, a time to light a candle of personal joy, sorrow, or concern here in the sanctuary, at the candle table, or at home. At that time, if you would like a candle brought to you, please raise your hand. After we kindle the light, we'll be together in a time of shared silence, out of which we'll sing the hymn, "There is a Love." The words are printed in your order of service and will appear on the live stream screen. We begin with a meditation for those who have far to travel by Jan Richardson. She writes, "If you could see the journey whole, you might never undertake it, might never dare that first step that propels you from the place you have known toward the place you know not. Call it one of the mercies of the road, that we see it only by stages as it opens before us, as it comes into our keeping step by single step. There is nothing for it but to go, and by our going, take the vows the pilgrim takes, to be faithful to the next step, to rely on more than the map, to heed the signposts of intuition and dream, to follow the star that only you will recognize, to keep an open eye for the wonders that attend the path, to press on beyond distractions, beyond fatigue, beyond what would tempt you from the way. There are vows that only you will know, the secret promises for your particular path, and the new ones you will need to make when the road is revealed by turns you could not have foreseen. Keep them, break them, make them again. Each promise becomes part of the path. Each choice creates the road that will take you to the place where at last you will kneel to offer the gift most needed, the gift that only you can give, before turning to go home by another way. Let us now kindle the light.
I read from Wild by Cheryl Strayed. Cheryl Strayed hiked 1,110 miles up the Pacific Crest Trail in a pilgrimage to heal her life's hurts, most especially the quick death of her 45-year-old mother to cancer when Cheryl was only 21. She went ill-prepared and too heavily loaded and quickly felt the pain of that. 2 small boots wrecking her feet, a too heavy pack leaving her hips bleeding and raw, and her back bent. And still, she walked. She claimed a cast-off hiking pole to steady her. She lighted her load, shedding what was not essential. Her legs grew stronger. And still, it never got easy, not even to the end. She wrote of the second week of the journey. It was day 1 of week 2, officially summer, the last day of June. And I was not only in a different season now, but in a different country too, ascending higher in the South Sierra Wilderness. In the 40 miles between Kennedy Meadows and Trail Pass, I'd climbed from an elevation of just over 6,100 feet to nearly 11,000. Even in the heat of the first afternoon back on the trail, I could feel an edge of cool in the air that would no doubt envelop me at night. There was no question that I was on the Sierra now, Muir's beloved range of light. I walked beneath great dark trees that put the smaller plants beneath in almost complete shadow, and past wide, grassy meadows of wildflowers. I scrambled over snow-melt streams by stepping from one unsteady rock to another. Aided by my ski pole. At foot speed, the Sierra Nevada seemed just barely surmountable. I could always take another step. It was only when I rounded a bend and glimpsed the white peaks ahead that I doubted my abilities. Only when I thought how far I had yet to go that I lost faith that I would get there.
That's what I said, I am you are me. Don't you see, I am you are me. That's what I said, I am you are me. Don't you see, I am you are me. That's what I said, I am you are me. Don't you see, I am you are me. That's what I said, I am you are me. Don't you see, I am you are me. That's what I said, I am you are me. Don't you see, I am you are me. That's what I said, I am you are me. Don't you see, I am you are me. That's what I said, I am you are me. Don't you see, I am you are me. That's what I said, I am you are me. Don't you see, I am you are me. It's a fact, subatomically. I am a
It is lovely to be back in Winchester again this year. And part of that is loving the opportunity to update you on the work of the urban ministry, but it's also an opportunity for me to appreciate the ways that Winchester is involved and has supported the work of the urban ministry through time. I'm grateful to my colleague, the Reverend Heather, for inviting me here today. Thank you. And to being willing to serve as one of 3 delegates to the urban ministry from Winchester. The other 2 are Patty Cameron and Gordy McIntosh, and I'm grateful for their efforts to weave us together more closely. Winchester has, through the years, given us many generous grants to support the work of the urban ministry. Thank you for that support. Winchester Friends have done things through the years like painting a section of the urban ministry for us as volunteers. John Kramer has volunteered to bring his jazz trio to perform at our Evening Under the Stars. For many years, Karen Erickson was a devoted urban ministry volunteer and engaged many friends in our work. It is good to be here to just appreciate and thank dear friends like Maggie Russell and fondly remember John Russell. We're grateful to supporters like Roy and Leora Cummings, Sally Delano and Bill Zink, David Fonseca and Martha Whirler. We have friends who began their support as congregants here moved away and still support us like Kate and Andy Ebbett and Jake and Marie Dacey. There are 7 families who supported us consistently for more than 20 years, which is quite an accomplishment. I also just want to say this morning that there are sometimes in the sphere of the urban ministry some special champions who encourage the urban ministry through thick and thin, remind us that change is possible, who are steadfast. And this morning, I wanted to lift up and thank Peter and Vicki Coccoluto for being those people for us. They have both at different times served on the board of the urban ministry, and they are the friends who are very close to us, who we call on for advice, to give us feedback on new programs, new efforts, and so I'm very grateful to be here to appreciate them after the service. I have a little thank you of a photo of the urban ministry, a flagship building for Church in Roxbury, to give to them in appreciation for all that they do for us, for which we are grateful. So thank you for all of the ways that Winchester is involved and supports our work. And this morning, I want to begin with a question. How is your heart? I mean, how are you? And how is your heart this morning in the midst of hard news and political news and all the challenges? Climate change and an upcoming election and all of it. How is your heart? The heart that is called has always been called to respond to a world in need of love and justice. How are you and how is your heart? I lift these up as we deepen our worship together this morning. And I ask you to hold it with you. And I begin this morning with a trip this past summer when I passed through Auburn, New York, which is a stone's throw from my hometown in upstate. In the stunning quiet and shimmer of the Finger Lakes near Lake Cayuga's shores, I spotted a sign on Route 34 for the Harriet Tubman House. Intrigued, I stopped in. Of course, I knew Harriet Tubman, called the Moses of her people, the woman who claimed her freedom from enslavement and led others through the dark by the light of the North Star to freedom too. I remembered her image in children's books, but not much else, and certainly not that she had once lived so near my childhood places. Harriet, born Araminta Ross, on the eastern shore of the slave state of Maryland, had deep ties in Boston. She visited this region many times, building a network of support and friendship that sustained her efforts to lead others to freedom. And she retired to Auburn on land from her friend William Seward, who was Lincoln's Secretary of State and an Auburn son. The AME Zion Church bought her home and is restoring it as a landmark. And the day I visited, an AME pastor led a tour of the property, sharing the contours of Tubman's life 110 years after she had died there. A half hours of stories inspired me to learn more, and so I read 2 biographies and Googled details endlessly. The details of her life made the madness of enslavement more vivid and real. Stories of how she was rented out as a 5-year-old child to tend to a white newborn on another plantation and was beaten if the baby awakened and cried in the night. How she, as a small child, sneaked a sugar cube and had to hide in a pig pen for days to avoid the violence awaiting her as punishment. Of the brain injury she suffered when an enslaver hurled a metal weight and struck her, some have theorized that the vision she had of God calling her to her daring work resulted from that injury. And how Harriet, as she renamed herself, rose out of this insane system and claimed her freedom, left her family, a beloved husband, all she knew to arrive in Philadelphia. She walked a long way to the city of freedom. And yet, more than that, what grabs hold is this, how Harriet, 5 feet tall, unable to read or write, with few resources, by grit and will and savvy, risked recapture and re-enslavement and death again and again in order to lead others to freedom. By foot and by night, she made this dangerous, cold, terrifying journey again and again and again. The way was long, but Harriet Tubman walked it about 15 times and led more than 70 others to freedom too. In the book, Harriet Tubman, The Road to Freedom, author Catherine Clinton wrote, quote, Harriet Tubman had been a liberator, a woman who stood up to the slave power, and a warrior whose actions spoke louder than words. She seized the road to freedom, not just for herself, but also for her family and others during her decade-long association with the Underground Railroad. This bravery earned her a fierce reputation. She was on the slaveholders' most wanted list with a steep price on her head. Posters with a description of Moses, as she was called, were plastered through the Upper South until the Civil War broke out, end quote. Harriet Tubman's personal courage and stamina captivates, not only because of her unusual courage before the war, or even her work to end enslavement as a spy for the North during the war, but that her work never ended. After the war, she worked until her death in Auburn to care and advocate for African Americans who were aging in poverty. She never stopped confronting racial oppression. The way was long, and she kept to it. The way is still long, and we are called to keep to it. 158 years after the Civil War ended, Greater Boston remains mired in the legacy of enslavement and racism and segregation. Graduation rates, incarceration rates, wealth and health measures remain shaped by them. Consider infant mortality. This past fall, the Boston Public Health Commission published the Maternal and Infant Health Report. In Boston, Black residents experienced the highest rates of infant mortality, preterm births, and low birth rate. The rate of infant mortality among Black infants in Boston was more than 3 times the rate for white babies. Consider housing. According to the Boston Indicators Project, 66% of Black residents are renters, double the rate of white residents. That means that Black residents are more often vulnerable to spiraling rent increases and then displacement and cannot build the wealth that is earned through home ownership. Consider the racial wealth gap. According to the Boston Indicators Project, racial wealth disparities have grown and not lessened over the past 30 years. Quote, in the United States, economic inequity is inextricably connected to growing racial inequity. By 2019, white wealth was almost 9 times as high as Black wealth. And consider death. The mortality gap remains a stark reminder of racism, with a 23-year difference in life expectancy between Roxbury residents at 68 years and those in Whiteback Bay, 1 mile away, at 91 years. Racism's stamp marks the lives of African Americans from birth through death and at every point in between. It is these realities that drive the Urban Ministry's mission to dismantle racism and white supremacy culture and to envision a greater Boston where all its residents can shape the present and the future. And so we continue to operate programs like our longtime domestic violence shelter, and we also reimagine our work for justice. We're expanding our after-school program for high school students to nurture the next generation of BIPOC leaders. And we're creating career exploration opportunities so that young people can choose their own paths forward. We created our Community Conversations series to highlight the history and impact of racism, this season shining a light on housing policy. We expanded our Roxbury Tours program, celebrating its richness and history, and we're nearing completion of the full restoration of our historic meeting house as a place to serve and celebrate Roxbury. UUs from our 46-member congregations, like Winchester, have helped us in every single one of these changes, and I am proud of what we have accomplished together. And there's so much work to do. Families in our neighborhood are getting pushed out by gentrification. Young people can't get the opportunities they need. Brilliant young people who flourished in our after-school program and graduated from college still cannot find the jobs that they want. The way is long. From our reading by Cheryl Strayed, quote, at foot speed, the Sierra Nevada seemed just barely surmountable. I could always take another step. It was only when I rounded a bend and glimpsed the white peaks ahead that I doubted my abilities. Only when I thought how far I had yet to go that I lost faith that I would get there. What we need is to take another step, and another, and another. In our work at the UU Urban Ministry and in the work that we all do for justice individually and collectively, we need to take another step. We need to keep walking forward even when it's daunting and steep and hard. And so I return to the question from the beginning. How are you, and how is your heart? What do you need to keep pressing forward for justice? How are you doing on the journey, on the long way? This morning, in a moment, I'm going to invite you to honor what you need to keep on your path for justice in whatever ways you feel called, to fight climate change, for trans rights, to bring music to all, to shelter immigrants, or to work for racial justice. Whatever calls you, I invite you to breathe in and to think about what you need for the next step on the long way. Sometimes we need community. Harriet Tubman needed it. She was sometimes alone in her underground rescues, but she was also encouraged and sustained by a web of like-minded abolitionists. In them, she found encouragement and support. The Underground Railroad was possible only because people committed to change worked together to form an unbroken line from enslavement to freedom. Sometimes we need to be part of a group that's working together for common goals, to encourage one another forward. Sometimes we need community. Sometimes we need silence and to nurture our inner spiritual lives, to put down our cell phones and the pinging and the buzz and the dizzying array of headlines, and breathe and connect with that which is bigger than we are. Sometimes we need to nurture the spiritual. Sometimes we need to remember that we are enough. What we offer, our gifts, our talents, are fully sufficient for the call. Harriet could not read or write. She had few material resources, but she was smart and cunning and had charisma. She used her gifts. What gifts do we bring to the change that we seek? Artist, activist, builder, speaker, organizer, dancer, listener. Sometimes we need to remember that we are enough. And so this morning, I'm going to invite you into a communion for the activist heart. I'm going to invite our 3 delegates forward and our assistants, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how we're going to share in a communion. Sometimes we need community, and science tells us that trees actually communicate beneath the surface of the soil. And so this morning, if what you need is community, I'm going to invite you to come forward or to stay in the pew and select a piece of tree bark from bark that actually fell on the grounds of the urban ministry. Sometimes we need to have quiet and nurture our spiritual lives. And if that's what you need, I'm going to invite you to take a candle to nurture the spiritual. And sometimes we need to remember that we are enough. And if that's what you need to remember for your journey, I'm going to invite you to take a stone to remain grounded in the knowledge that you are enough. So you are going to be invited to either come forward and select what you need for your journey, or to remain where you are, to raise your hand. And I believe we have someone who's going to bring these options to you in the pew. Come, whoever you are. Please take what you need as a communion for the activist heart. We must keep going even when it's muddy and steep and rock-strewn and when we're tired. The way is long and we must keep going because the world needs us to. Change takes time and faithfulness. At foot speed, we can always take another step. Amen, and may it be so.
Now comes the time in our service when we make an offering to support this self-supporting church and its many ministries. This is an important time to support this important community. In so many ways, we are rebuilding back our community after a very difficult pandemic period. Giving makes possible the many benefits that this wonderful community offers to each of us. This morning, we share our gifts with the Unitarian Universalist Urban Ministry, the organization Reverend Mary Margaret serves, whose mission and vision are to work across race and place to dismantle racism and white supremacy culture and to advance racial, social, and economic justice. The UU Urban Ministry envisions a greater Boston where all people live with freedom and dignity and to have equitable access to resources and opportunity to shape the present and the future. Here are the different ways you can donate. Those in the sanctuary may give cash, checks, or donate electronically. Text to the number in your order of service or visit our website under the Giving page. If you are visiting for the first time, either in person or online, you are our guest. In-person attendees can find a physical visitor card in the pew racks in front of you. Please complete it and put it in the collection plate. Information about how to give online and how to complete the virtual visitor card will soon be shared with live stream attendees through text on your screen. The offering will now be generously given and gratefully received. Those who wish to do so are invited to join in the unison affirmation. We gather not for ourselves alone, but to use our common power to build the beloved community within and beyond these walls. We create and reaffirm this covenant this day to make justice flourish, to practice compassion amidst difference, and to embody transformative love. Rise in body, rise in spirit to join in singing our closing hymn, My Life Flows On.
Have gifts to bring to this world, and remembering that the world offers you gifts to sustain you as you go. Go out in peace and hope.
please join me in reciting the words printed in your order of service for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. This service has ended, but our life of service continues. Please join us in Metcalf Hall. Thank you.